My name is Helen Carter. I'm 68 years old, a widow and a mother. I thought I had done everything right in life. I raised a kind son, supported my husband through his illness, and built a home filled with love and laughter. But none of that prepared me for the day I came back from a trip to find 4 suitcases sitting neatly on the sidewalk in front of my own house. It had rained the night before. The pavement was still damp under the morning sun, and there they were, my bags lined up like a silent accusation. Tucked into the handle of my largest suitcase was a folded note. The handwriting was sharp, fast, familiar. If you still want to stay here, we've cleared the garage for you. Your loving daughter. I stared at the words, hoping they would change, hoping this was some cruel joke. But the note stayed the same, cold, final. Before the taxi even pulled away, I reached for my phone and called the bank. My hands were trembling, but my voice stayed steady. I needed to hear what I already knew. "Yes, Mrs. Carter," the woman on the line said. "Your automatic mortgage payment of $1,867 went through last Friday as scheduled." I thanked her, hung up, and stood there in the silence, the weight of everything crashing over me. I had been paying the mortgage secretly ever since I signed the house over to my son Ethan and his wife Vanessa 2 years ago. They were young parents then, overwhelmed and grateful. Or at least I thought they were. I looked up at the house. My house, the one my late husband and I had built together when Ethan was just a toddler. Every brick, every window, every tree in the yard had a memory attached to it. And now I was being told that I belonged in the garage. The wind picked up, and I suddenly felt every one of my 68 years. But I wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. Not to them. Not to this. The garage door was unlocked, just as the note had promised. I stepped inside slowly, dragging one of my suitcases behind me. The space smelled faintly of oil and dust, like memories left too long in the dark. Against the back wall, they had set up a twin mattress bare, except for a thin floral sheet and a single pillow. A small nightstand stood beside it with a lamp that didn't match anything I owned. And next to it, a portable clothing rack sagged slightly under the weight of my coats and dresses. My books, framed photos, and keepsakes were crammed into cardboard boxes labeled "Mom's Stuff." The handwriting was unmistakably Vanessa's. I sat down on the edge of the mattress. The concrete floor beneath my feet was cold. Through the small window above the water heater, I could just make out the silhouette of the house, the one I had raised my son in, the one where I had said goodbye to my husband. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Ethan. "Mum, we need the space. Vanessa has been asking for a home office for months. The garage has everything you need. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult." As if I were the unreasonable one. As if I hadn't spent years making everything easier for everyone else. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up with Ethan during his asthma attacks. The double shifts I worked after my husband's stroke. The weekends I gave up so he and Vanessa could go on their little getaways. Now I was a burden, an afterthought, an inconvenience best stored in the garage. I didn't reply to his message. Instead, I sat there staring at my life in boxes and let the silence press against my chest. I had never felt so small. I didn't stay long in the garage. After an hour of sitting on that narrow mattress, staring at my belongings packed away like clutter, I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out for help. I called Judy. Judy Bennett had been my closest friend for more than 30 years. We met when our sons were in kindergarten. She'd seen me through every season of my life. When Richard lost his job, when Ethan went off to college, when I buried my husband. She answered on the second ring. "Helen, what's wrong?" I didn't mean to cry, but the sound of her voice broke something loose inside me. "They moved me into the garage," I whispered. There was a beat of stunned silence. "I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes. True to her word, Judy pulled up in her blue Subaru with a blanket in the back seat and a thermos of coffee. She didn't ask for details. She just held me as I cried and then helped me carry my bags. Her home smelled like lemon and old wood and safety. Her husband, Jim, greeted me with a quiet nod and an extra pillow. "You stay as long as you need," Judy said, setting a mug in front of me at her kitchen table. "Jim and I rattle around this house like two spoons in a drawer. You're not a burden." I wrapped my fingers around the warm ceramic. "This can't be permanent. I need to figure out what to do about the house." "You mean your house," Judy corrected, her voice firm. "The one you're still paying for." I looked down, ashamed of how far I'd let things go. "They needed help," I said. "They had a baby. I thought giving them the house would make things easier." Judy's eyes softened. "And they took advantage of that. Of you." And for the first time, I allowed myself to admit she was right. The next morning, Judy made pancakes. I hadn't eaten them in years, but something about the gesture, simple, warm, familiar, made me feel human again. We sat at her kitchen table, the sun coming in through the window. When she said, "There's something I need to tell you, Helen. I didn't want to upset you before, but you deserve to know," my stomach tightened. "What is it?" She hesitated. "Last week at book club, Vanessa was there. She'd had a couple glasses of wine and got a little too talkative. She mentioned that she and Ethan are planning to put the house on the market." I felt the blood drain from my face. "They're selling it." Judy nodded slowly. "They want to move into some new development. Oakwood Hills, I think it's called." I stared at her, barely hearing the name. "My house. The one Richard and I had built from nothing. The place where Ethan took his first steps. Where Richard planted a garden for our 20th anniversary. Where he took his last breath. And they were going to sell it just like that. Without telling me, without asking. They think it's theirs," I said quietly. "Legally," Judy said gently, "maybe it is, but morally, that's a different story." I couldn't speak. My throat burned. The betrayal felt like a second death. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. Judy didn't hesitate. Her eyes sharpened with that fierce loyalty I had always admired. "First, you're going to stop paying their mortgage. Let's see how quickly their plans change when the bank starts calling. And second, you're going to talk to my nephew Matt. He's a lawyer, deals with elder abuse and family financial disputes. If there's any way to fight this, he'll find it." I nodded slowly. For the first time in days, I felt something shift. Not fear, not sadness. Fire. Matt Wallace didn't look like a lawyer. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, and his office was filled with books and framed pictures of his dog. But his eyes were sharp, and he listened like every word mattered. After I told him everything, he sat back in his chair and folded his hands. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "You transferred the title of the home to your son and daughter-in-law 2 years ago, but you've continued making the mortgage payments every single month since then." I nodded. And they've been living there rent-free, planning to sell the property without telling you?" "Yes," he exhaled through his nose. "Mrs. Carter, what you've described may qualify as what's called an equitable lien, because you've made consistent financial contributions to a property you no longer legally own. You may be entitled to a claim on it, especially if there was any sort of verbal agreement or expectation." I blinked. I was just trying to help them. Matt's expression softened, but his voice stayed firm, and they took advantage of that help. "You have more options than you think." Before moving forward with anything legal, Judy suggested I confront them, give them a chance to make it right. So, the next day, I stood on the front porch of the house I had once called home. My palms were sweating as I rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered, surprised to see me. "Hi, Helen," she said, using that too sweet tone that always felt like an insult. "We weren't expecting you." "I need to speak to Ethan," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house felt different, colder. My reading chair was gone. Photos of Richard were missing from the mantel. Ethan appeared, wiping his hands on a towel. "Mum, what are you doing here? I didn't waste time." "Judy told me you're selling the house." Ethan and Vanessa exchanged a quick look. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You were going to tell me?" I asked. "Once things were finalized," Ethan replied. "Finalized. Like my memories meant nothing." I took a deep breath and said what I came to say. "I've stopped paying the mortgage." Ethan's face changed instantly. The easy calm he had worn turned sharp with panic. "You what?" he asked, stepping closer. "I've stopped the automatic payments," I repeated. "If you want to sell the house, you'll need to cover the mortgage yourselves." Vanessa's voice rose behind him. "You can't just do that." "What about our credit?" "We have plans, Helen. We've already put an offer on the house in Oakwood Hills." I looked at Hercombe and unshaken. "Then I hope you have a backup plan, because this one just got a lot more complicated." Ethan tried to regroup. "Mom, come on. This house was Dad's gift to us. You know that. It was never really yours." The words hit like a slap. Never really yours. 35 years of mortgage payments. 35 years of family dinners, birthday parties, late-night talks with my husband in that kitchen, story time with Ethan in the living room, all erased in 5 words. "Well," I said softly, "then I suppose there's nothing more to discuss." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Your father would be ashamed of you, Ethan, and for the first time in my life, so am I." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out into the spring air, my heart pounding, but my spine straight. Back at Judy's, I told them everything. Matt shook his head in disbelief. Judy just looked at me with pride. "You finally stood up for yourself," she said, handing me a glass of wine. Matt leaned forward. "It's a strong start, but we'll need to back it up. I'll contact the bank, explain the situation, and find out what kind of lien we can legally place on the property. In the meantime, gather all proof of your payments, bank statements, checks, anything." I nodded. I had kept records. Richard had taught me to. "What about the rest of my things still at the house?" I asked. Judy smiled grimly. "We'll go get them. And if they try anything funny, I've still got my softball bat from our league days." For the first time in a long while, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. The next morning, I received a call from the mortgage department at First Oregon Federal Bank. "This is Trevor Phillips," the voice said. "Mrs. Carter, we've reviewed your payment history. You've made consistent payments for 26 months. We understand you've decided to stop those payments. Is that correct?" "Yes," I replied. "That's correct." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "I'd like to invite you to the branch to discuss some options. You may have more leverage here than you realize." 2 hours later, I sat across from Trevor, a kind-faced man about Ethan's age. He explained something called an equitable lien. Since I had paid the mortgage without receiving benefit from the property, I could potentially place a lien on the house. They wouldn't be able to sell it unless they addressed the lien first. It was the first time in weeks that I felt a sense of control returning. "There's one more thing," Trevor added. "Your son called this morning. He sounded flustered. He didn't seem to understand how mortgages work or the consequences of missed payments. I wasn't surprised. Ethan had always relied on someone first, Richard, then me. Now, apparently, Vanessa. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Mum, we need to talk about the mortgage, ASAP, please." Trevor looked at me. "What would you like to do, Mrs. Carter?" It was such a simple question, but I hadn't been asked what I wanted in years. I thought about Ethan and Vanessa, about the garage, the note, the boxes labeled Mum's stuff, the cold mattress on a concrete floor. I thought about Richard, how he would have hated seeing me treated like that. "I want what's rightfully mine," I said, voice firm. Trevor smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't out of pity. It was respect. Later that afternoon, on my walk back to Judy's, I passed Rosie's cafe. A handwritten sign hung in the window. Help wanted part-time server. I stopped. Something stirred in me. Something bold, something them free. I walked inside and asked for an application. It was time to start over on my own terms. Working at Rosie's cafe was harder than I remembered. The last time I'd waited tables was in college, and that was half a lifetime ago. But there was something deeply satisfying about earning my own money again, even if it was just from pouring coffee and remembering who wanted cream. By the end of each shift, my feet ached and my back complained, but the tips in my apron were mine. Every dollar felt like a small declaration. I'm still here. I still matter. 3 weeks in, I was refilling sugar dispensers near the counter when I saw him, Ethan, standing stiffly by the hostess stand. He looked smaller somehow, less certain. I met his eyes, then nodded toward a corner booth. We sat across from each other like strangers. You look different, he said. I am different, I replied. He shifted uncomfortably. Mum, about the house. I'm not discussing that here, I said, keeping my tone even. If that's why you came, this isn't the time. He looked desperate. We're in trouble. The bank mentioned a lien. Our credit score is tanking. We can't sell unless it's resolved. I folded my hands in front of me. What do you want from me, Ethan? We need you to lift the lien and resume the mortgage payments just until the sale goes through. And what do I get in return? I asked. We'll make sure you're taken care of. There's a great senior community in Westbrook. Very nice amenities. I raised my hand to stop him. I'm not interested in being managed. I've spent enough time living under someone else's roof. He frowned. You can't keep doing this, Mom. You're almost 70. 68, I corrected him. And doing just fine. He sighed, then leaned forward. Fine. What do you want? A cut from the sale. I looked at my son, the man who once called me Mummy, who once ran into my arms with muddy shoes and scraped knees, and saw someone I no longer recognized. I want the house back, I said. He blinked. That's not possible. We've already made an offer on Oakwood Hills. That's not my problem, I said calmly. Meet me at Matt Wallace's office tomorrow at 2. Bring Vanessa. I want everything in writing. He nodded slowly, confused. You're serious. I've never been more serious in my life. I arrived early to Matt's office the next day. Nerves coiled tightly in my stomach. I hadn't slept much. Over and over, I'd replayed the decision in my mind, questioning if I was doing the right thing, if I was being too harsh, too proud. At exactly 2 o'clock, Ethan and Vanessa walked in. They looked like they were headed to a real estate meeting, polished, composed, determined. Matt greeted them with the same calm professionalism he'd always shown me. Thank you both for coming. Mrs. Carter has considered your request and has prepared a formal response. He slid the document across the desk. Ethan picked it up and began reading. His expression shifted quickly from hopeful to confused to furious. What is this? He snapped. That, I said, is my offer. I will resume mortgage payments, but the house will be sold to me, not to strangers. Vanessa grabbed the paper. You want us to sell you the house for the remaining mortgage balance? It's worth 3 times that. It's worth exactly what I've put into it, I replied. 35 years of love, labor, and sacrifice. You can't do this, Ethan said, voice rising. With the lien in place, Matt interrupted smoothly. You can't sell the property until it's resolved. If you decline her offer, you're welcome to contest it, but I must warn you, it will be lengthy, public, and expensive. And in the meantime, Oakwood Hills will sell to someone else. They stepped outside to confer. I stared down at my hands, trying to steady the tremble in them. When they returned, Ethan's face was tight. We'll accept your offer, he said. But you've chosen the house over your family. I met his eyes, unblinking. No, I chose not to be erased. And with that, the house was mine again. Not just in name, in truth. The first night back in the house, I couldn't sleep. I wandered from room to room, touching the walls, pausing at the stair railing where we'd marked Ethan's height every year. I stood in the kitchen, remembering how Richard and I used to dance here, when no one was watching, just slow circles to the sound of the dishwasher. 3 months had passed since that final meeting at Matt's office. The legal transfer was complete. Ethan and Vanessa had moved out, bitter and silent, and I had moved back in alone, but not lonely. The house had changed. Vanessa had repainted in dull greys and replaced the oak cabinets with sleek white panels. The warm tones Richard and I had chosen were gone, but the bones of the house were still here. The creaky step on the stairs, the way light came through the bay window in the afternoon, the floorboard in the hallway that dipped just slightly to the left. That morning, as I was unpacking dishes I'd stored at Judy's, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Ethan standing on the porch, holding a paper bag of pastries, and looking unsure of himself. "The flowers look nice," he said, nodding toward the tulips blooming by the fence. "Richard planted those every fall," I said. It was his favorite ritual. Ethan nodded, shifting awkwardly. "We didn't get the house in Oakwood Hills. Our credit took too big a hit." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I meant it. "Even after everything, Vanessa's pregnant again," he added. "Due in January." "Congratulations," I said, my voice quiet. He looked up at me. "Emma misses you. She doesn't understand why we don't come around anymore." I felt the sharp ache in my chest. "She's always welcome here." He hesitated. "So are we. If that's okay." I didn't answer right away, because forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. But I left the door open. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a rhythm that felt both old and entirely new. I still work mornings at Rosie's Cafe. The regulars knew my name now. They asked about my tulips and complimented my pies. I'd even started bringing in fresh herbs from my garden to brighten up the lunch specials. Afternoons were for the house my house, which I slowly began to make my own again. I didn't have the money to undo all of Vanessa's modern upgrades, but I didn't need to. I added warmth where I could, throw pillows in soft yellows, framed photos of Richard and baby Ethan back on the mantel. Richard's fishing rods hung in the den like the proud trophies they once were. One Saturday evening, Judy and Jim came over for dinner, along with Matt and Rosa from the cafe. We sat outside in the backyard under the string lights Richard had installed so many years ago, their soft glow reflecting off wine glasses and laughter. "This place feels like you again," Rosa said, handing me a plate of lemon bars. "It is me, finally," I smiled. As the sky turned dusky blue and the stars blinked awake, Judy raised her glass. "To Helen Carter," she said, her voice full and proud, "who reminds us that it's never too late to take your life back." Everyone clinked glasses, their faces warm in the fading light. I looked around the table, not family by blood, but people who had shown up when it mattered, who had seen me, valued me, helped me stand again. Later, after the dishes were done and the yard had quieted, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the creaks of the old wood and the breeze rustling through the tulips. This wasn't just my home anymore. It was my beginning. That night, as I sat alone under the stars, I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd reclaimed. I thought of Richard, of the quiet strength in his hands, of the way he always left the porch light on for me. I thought of Ethan, the little boy who once believed I could fix anything. And I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who gave and gave until she forgot she had a name of her own. But I remembered now. I was Helen Carter. I was not a burden. I was not someone to be boxed up and stored in the garage. I was a woman who had spent her life giving and now finally had learned to give back to herself. To anyone watching this who has ever felt erased, who's ever been told they're too old, too much, too difficult, I want you to know this. You are not alone. You are not too late. And you are never, ever too small to take your life back. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is say enough. Enough to being taken for granted. Enough to being silenced. Enough to being treated like a shadow in your own story. That moment on the sidewalk in the rain, staring at my suitcases, I thought I was losing everything. But the truth is, I was just beginning. And now, standing in the home I rebuilt with my own hands, with laughter returning to its walls and peace settling into its corners, I know this much is true. I didn't choose a house over my family. I chose to remember who I was before they forgot. This is Helen Carter, and this time I'm not going anywhere.